All right, guys, let's move on to our next topic of potential trade targets. And this time we're going to be looking at wide receivers. And unlike running back, where I had a hard time finding people, there are actually quite a few guys that are worth exploring here. But before we talk about the wide receiver trade targets, let's make sure we can't make do with something that won't cost draft picks. So the reason why we might need a little bit of receiver help right now is clear. Metcalf injured. I think he's going to miss at least a couple games. Lockett playing through an injury. He's fine for now, but there's no guarantee that he's going to hold up the whole season. And if you can do something to reduce the load on his shoulders, that's good. Eskridge, as of right now, not really developing. Can't count on him. You've got Marquise Goodwin. He's doing his thing. That's cool. But then you've got Derek Young, who has never caught a pass in the NFL, and Bo Melton, who hasn't been able to crack the roster yet. So it's up to the team to judge whether or not those guys are ready. And it seems like the team has judged that as of right now, those guys are not ready to take any kind of a role other than Derek Young basically being a blocker, right? Like he's a good receiver blocker, but we don't trust him with too much else beyond that. So if this Metcalf thing is going to go on until, say, the bye week, and you're also concerned about the Lockett stuff, we could use a little bit of help at receiver. So if you take a look at the available players in free agency, just get a rough idea of who's, not unsigned. You've got some names, guys like Will Fuller, T.Y. Hilton still out there. Cole Beasley, I think he kind of retired. Same with Emmanuel Sanders. You could call him up, I guess. I don't know if it would do anything for you. Those guys might be pretty happy with not playing football this year, but they're guys who would probably be serviceable. I think Deshaun Jackson got picked up recently, so he's not on the table. But you've got some guys who have done some things and turned some heads in the NFL. You've got young guys who kind of washed out, like Andy Isabella. Oh, Mohamed Sanu. Dede Westbrook has been a guy that I've always kind of liked. So there are some options here, but maybe you need something a little bit more. Maybe you're thinking about more than just a month until DK gets back. Maybe you're thinking about the rest of this year and maybe even future years. So let's talk about some other options. Now, real quick, I know people are going to talk about Odell. I'm not really going to talk about him because he's not going to be ready until after DK's back anyway. And a big part of this trade is that you help the team while Metcalf is rehabbing his knee injury. So, with that in mind, let's start taking a look at some of the trade targets. First guy we're going to take a look at here is Paris Campbell from the Colts. This is a guy who was a second round pick a handful of years ago. It has not gone terribly well for him in the NFL. He hasn't played in that many games. And when he has played, it hasn't been great. 2002 has been his best year by far so far. He's already caught more passes this year than he has in any previous year, and his yardage totals are higher than they've ever been. He's got as many touchdowns this year as he did his entire career before this year. But this Colts team, they're not very good. They just lost Matt Ryan, and this guy's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. Paris Campbell is free and clear to leave in 2023. So the Colts, who are not completely out of it yet, but they probably will be because of the quarterback injury, and just in general, they don't look like a very good team to me. They may look at Paris Campbell and go, let's get whatever little scrap of value we can. If it's a sixth round pick, it's a sixth round pick. It's better than the nothing we're going to get when he leaves. His contract, obviously, going to be super cheap. The Colts save like 1.1 million, and that's really all you have to take on. And then the next year, he's a free agent. So this is not really the kind of trade you want to make if you need an emergency plug-in for DK Metcalf while he's injured. But if you're trying to just generally add to your depth to protect yourself from potential future injuries and maybe a circumstance where you just need that one extra receiver who can at least play competently, Paris Campbell might be the guy. He's obviously relatively unproven. He's obviously not been very productive, but there's something here. I feel like there's something here. Next guy would be Brandon Cooks. This is probably the big gun. If you want to make your receiver core not just intact or passable while DK's out, if you want to make it supercharged when he gets back, you add Brandon Cooks. Bump Marquise Goodwin to being a number 4 receiver, take the load off of Lockett's shoulders a little bit so he doesn't have to play as much, and you've got a potentially super high-powered offense. And look, I don't need to sell you guys on Brandon Cooks as a player. Very productive career, 8,200 receiving yards, 47 touchdowns, played on 4 different teams, had success pretty much everywhere he's been. He's had at least one 1,000-yard season with every team he's been on, I think. So we're talking about a low-key elite wide receiver over the last decade. And Houston may put him on the block because they're Houston. They don't really have a need for a veteran receiver. They need picks. So if you look at Brandon Cooks' contract, it's not amazing. He did re-up with Houston recently, 2 years, almost $40 million. So if you want Brandon Cooks, you're going to have to pay a lot of money. And it's also going to be somewhat understood that Houston is still going to have to pay him a lot of money even if they trade him. There was a $16 million signing bonus with the extension, plus the signing bonus he had left over from the previous deal that he was already on with the Texans. If the Texans trade him now, they're still eating $8 million dead in 2022 and $16.2 million dead in 2023. Now, that's still significant savings in 2023. It's a small savings in 2022, but Houston is going to look at this and go, look, if we trade Cooks, obviously we don't have a lot of use for him as a player right now. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense for us to part ways with him because he's not doing us that much good here, because it's going to be a while before we're back on top. But we're going to still have to pay him a lot. So you might have to give up a draft pick of some value, like a 4th rounder. They're not going to just give him away. But if you really want to supercharge the offense, Brandon Cooks is probably the guy to go after. The next guy is, I don't know if Denver would pick up the phone with us right now, and I don't know if this is a guy you would even want, but I want to talk about a couple guys over in Orange in Colorado. Regardless, Jeudy being number 1. He had a lot of hype going into this season. He had a lot of hype coming into the NFL. This is a former first-round pick. Top 15 pick, actually. He's still only 23. He's still young. You look at his career so far, 2020 was okay. 2021 he got hurt, was a pretty big disappointment. So far this year, disappointment. Low catch rate, generally. Not good hands. He does a lot of the other stuff you want a receiver to do, right? He's good at getting open. He's fast. He's got decent size. But he can't catch. And that's kind of a problem when you're playing wide receiver in the NFL. Now, I will say that he has kind of played with bad quarterbacks in Denver, right? This was supposed to be the year when he finally got to play with a good quarterback, and, well, Wilson has not been good. So he's still got a resume filled with lackluster quarterbacks. Maybe you take a shot on him. Maybe Denver gives him up cheap because he hasn't been living up to expectations. And maybe this draft status that he has, a former first-round pick, doesn't hold up. And you get him for maybe a 5th rounder even, and then you're just inheriting 2 cheap years and then the 5th-year option, which could kick in if he gets to Seattle and starts playing well. So I'm not super excited about this one, admittedly, but it's cheap. I think Denver's going to have to give him away for less value than he's actually worth because of their situation. I think Jeudy gets moved if Denver loses on Sunday against the Jaguars. I don't know if it'll be to us. I don't know if I'm super excited about it. I am a little more into this next idea from Denver, which would be KJ Hamler. He's a guy who is rumored to already be on the trade block as is. Former 2nd-round pick. Hasn't really worked out for him. He had an okay rookie year, like almost 400 yards from or actually over 400 yards from scrimmage, 3 touchdowns. 2021 didn't play hardly at all, only played in 3 games. And so far this year, the dude may as well be invisible. The dude's got 5 catches in 6 games. The dude has been targeted 11 times. The thing he's done that's gotten the most attention in the NFL so far this year is throw his helmet because he didn't get to catch the game-winning touchdown in Indy or against Indy. So, yeah, this is a guy who was a second-round pick, so he's clearly something, but it hasn't manifested in the NFL at all. He's got 40 catches in now his third year. You look at his contract, he's got the rest of this year and then all of next year on his rookie deal. Then he hits free agency. Denver saves about 1.2 and 1.2 this year and then 1.6 the next year because they'd only be on the hook for the signing bonus. So they would save a little bit of money and it would just be a chance to recoup maybe. He's been so unproductive, I would go so far as to say like a 6th round pick. I think you could get KJ for a 6th rounder, maybe a 5th. I would rather do that than Jerry Jeudy. Jeudy, because he was a first-round pick, might cost you a 4th, even though he hasn't been good. Hamler's a guy they might just basically give away for a 6th rounder. So I would call up Denver, see what's going on with Jeudy, but my main target would be KJ Hamler. I think there's something here. I think he's a decent player. And I think because he's an experienced NFL player who has had semi-productive games in the past, you might be able to go to him and say, we need you to go in there now. And he might be able to say, yeah, sure, I can start a couple games while Metcalf's working on his way back. So, decent option, KJ Hamler. But it really all comes down to this upcoming game that Denver's playing against Jacksonville. I think they will trade just about everything that isn't glued down goes if Denver loses this upcoming game. So I guess we're just rooting for Jacksonville, and then we're hoping that Denver's actually willing to do another trade with us after, I mean, what happened last time, right? So, yeah, definitely look to take advantage of these teams that are going to try to blow it up. But sometimes you can also make a deal with a team that is actually really good. And I want to throw Zach Pascal's name into the ring here. He, decent size, had some productive years in Indianapolis. He spent his first 4 years in Indy. Year 2 and year 3 were both actually pretty solid. Caught 10 touchdowns and had well over 1,200 yards, 85 catches. 2021 numbers dipped a bit. And 2022 he went to Philly on a super cheap deal, and he barely plays. Philly, they're pretty good at receiver with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith as your 1 and your 2. So they might be looking at Zach Pascal and going, okay, he's clearly not going to be here next year. We're not using him. Maybe we should try to go get something from him. You're obviously gambling that your guys stay healthy, but this is a player who is, he's going to turn 28 later this year. So he's kind of in his physical prime. You'd think he wants to go out there and produce while he can, not just use this year to sit on the bench and clap his hands. Like I said, the contract is basically nothing, $1.5 million. You would inherit the base salary of $1 million. Eagles would save that $1 million, still owe him about $465,000, but I mean, they're going to be paying him either way some amount. You'd rather recoup a draft pick, and when it comes to a guy like Zach Pascal, you can probably get out for a 6th rounder. Maybe even, I know we don't have a 7th, but he might just cost something like that too. The last guy I want to talk about is kind of the wild card here. I'm not saying I like it. I'm not saying I'm into it. But let's play with the idea for a second here. Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney, 1st round pick, 20th overall, not that long ago. Went into the NFL. It's been a headache since day one, right? He's had a hard time staying healthy. He's had a hard time getting on the field. He hasn't gotten in the end zone yet. He's basically barely played in 2022. In fact, let's take a look at his snap count so far this year. Yeah, he's got 35 offensive snaps for a really good Giants team that desperately needs receivers. Excuse me. Remember, this Giants team has gotten very little from Kenny Golladay, and they lost Sterling Shepard to the ACL, and yet Kadarius Toney can't get on the field. So it's pretty clear that New York is done with this dude. They want to get rid of him. They will probably give him away at this point because who's going to fall for this? Who's going to fall for this terrible production? Like, that 1st round draft status only carries you so far. When this guy can't get on the field for a team with terrible receivers, nobody's going to fall for any big offer. Maybe you're talking like a 5th round pick at this point. You would inherit the rest of his rookie deal, which wouldn't be that much. It's still a, rookie deal, even though if it was a first rounder. And you would be on the hook for 1.3, 1.9, 2.5. The Giants still have to pay a decent part of his salary, but it's better than just having him sit on your bench clapping his hands for a few years. You also get the fifth-year option if that ends up being relevant. And you're getting a guy who is very talented. Like, he was a very good player at Florida. And there's no denying that when he's gotten the ball in his hands in New York, the few times it's happened, he's been a playmaker. It just, something's not working. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, whatever it is that's not working, is it a problem with Tony? Or is it a problem with just the way he's mixing with that particular organization? That's a little harder to answer, but this is an opportunity to get a young, cheap player for 4 years for not much investment. Again, we're talking, at this point, what is Tony worth? With this level of production, with his inability to get on the field, with the supposed theories that he's a little bit of a head case, or at least some kind of a distraction, you're probably talking like 5th round pick. It'll be kind of like when we traded Percy Harvin, we just wanted him out of the building. I'm not going to talk about DJ Moore because Carolina's already made it clear they want the moon for him, and there's no way I'm giving up massive assets for a guy like DJ Moore. He's a good player, but I'm just not doing it. I'm looking to be cheap here. I'm not trying to blow up my future so I can obtain a guy like a DJ Moore. Also not talking about Michael Thomas because I think he's kind of bad at football now, and more importantly than that, maybe his contract is heinous, and you would have to inherit a lot of money if you traded for him, and the Saints would still have massive dead cap. So yeah, you'd have to pay me to take Michael Thomas at this point. And those are the main guys that I see. There are some intriguing options here. You have solid veterans who just need to get off their terrible team. You have guys who are kind of rotting away on good teams. You have guys who need to go because of fire sales. You have guys who just aren't working at their current location. Something's going to work here. I don't know what it is. I don't know if we're going to make the move, but there's a good move to be made here somewhere at the receiver position. All right, I'm going to get out of here. Peace out, Go Hawks. Let me know what you think down below. Who would you get? Is there a name I missed? Look, we've got something good going on here right now, but there's a little bit of danger knocking at the receiver position. Wouldn't hurt to be proactive. All right, see you guys later.